Welcome back to That's So Nourishing. In this episode, we are going to be talking all things boundaries. Boundaries are a hot topic, I feel, because while they are so important that we have them and such an amazing act of self love for ourselves, they can be so sticky and so scary to set, and they can bring up a lot for a lot of people. As much as I'm sure all of us know how powerful boundaries are, we can still struggle with actually setting the boundary and with actually feeling like setting a boundary is something that's in our reach or that we're able to do. So, in this episode, I really want to break down what boundaries actually are, why they're for the highest good, and give you a reframe on boundaries so that you can hopefully develop a better relationship with boundaries. So that if you are currently getting sprawled out, like your energy is getting leaked all over the place and you're getting caught in a lot of dynamics that aren't serving you, that you can tighten that up so that you can focus on really what's important to you in your life and really create what it is you want to create and spend your time in the way that you're ultimately desiring to spend it instead of constantly feeling like you're getting pulled in different directions or you're getting taken advantage of or people are treating you in a way that you don't want them to or you're just getting in kind of icky situations. You can tell I'm a mom of a 1-year-old because as I say icky, I have that song in my head. Icky sticky bubble gum, just playing all the time. One of my faves. But I digress. Boundaries are such an amazing act of self love. We talked about self love in the last episode, so I would definitely say go check that out if you haven't already. But self love is prioritizing yourself, and boundaries are such an amazing way to prioritize yourself and to really declare that you are setting a limit and to really declare what you're available for or what you need in a situation. That's ultimately what a boundary is. It's just letting people know what you're available for or what you need in different moments. Think that boundaries carry a lot of baggage because so many of us, especially as women, we are taught from a young age not to say no or not to disappoint anyone or to people please and to give to others and to override our own needs. And so when we actually want to set a boundary, and we actually want to tell someone no, or tell someone that we can't be there for them in the way that they're expecting us to, or tell someone something that's not just a complete yes to what they're asking for, it can bring up so much in our nervous systems and it can be so terrifying. So I want you to know I really see you in that. And if boundaries are something that's really hard for you, know that there's a lot of reasons why, and it's not your fault. That there's so much patterning that is built throughout your life that has really created that. And I'm going to talk about that in this episode too. We think that boundaries are creating disconnection or they're creating a wall between us and someone else, or that we're going to disappoint someone, or that they're scary and we might lose a relationship or hurt someone's feelings. A lot of this stuff comes up for boundaries. I know for me, it comes up too. Boundaries are not always the easiest thing for me to partake in as well. Even when I know I want to set one, it can take a lot for me to really muster the courage at times to actually say it. But on the other side of boundaries is so much freedom and so much agency in our own lives. Because think about it, if you're not setting boundaries and you're constantly feeling pulled in different directions, you're constantly in resentment, you're constantly overriding your own needs, doing things that you don't want to be doing, you're constantly lost in a million different stories and dynamics and thoughts, and your energy is just all over the place, like that silly putty on a wall, then how are you actually going to be able to create what you want in life? Your energy is going to get so depleted through all of these dynamics that instead of you being able to have the energy to move forward in the way that you're ultimately desiring for what you want to create and how you want to feel in your life, your energy is going to go to all these other things that aren't actually serving you. Whereas when you can set the boundary and the boundaries that you need, you can start to create that fortress around you and the containment to then be able to focus where you want to go, to not have your energy leaking all these different places so you can actually move and take the steps towards what it is you want to create in your life and how you want to feel in your life and what you want to occupy your mind as well. Boundaries really are for the highest good when we look at them in a specific way, when we actually look at how they're going to serve everyone in this situation and we communicate them in a clear, grounded, regulated manner from our hearts. Boundaries can be One of the ways that we can develop the greatest forms of trust in a relationship because we're actually being honest and we're actually sharing what we need and what we're available for. Otherwise, the person doesn't know. And if they don't know, then oftentimes they can't give that to us. And oftentimes people will override it or expect things from us. But if we don't tell them, then they don't actually know that they're overriding a boundary for us. So it's really important that we articulate our boundaries and that we get clear on them. And boundaries, oftentimes we think about them being with another person, or we're telling the other person, right? Boundaries, like I said, are what are communicating what we need and what we're available for. But it's not always with another person. There's a lot of different kinds of boundaries that we can set. So we have boundaries with other people where we can tell them that we're not available for them to speak to us in a certain way, or that we can't support them in what they need right now. And in a lot of different dynamics that come up with other people. We can have boundaries around who we surround ourselves with. If we're starting a new business, we don't want to surround ourselves around people who are going to be negative, who are going to share their negative opinions or their own limits. Check out episode 6 where we go deep into made up limits, but we don't want their limits and their negative thoughts around us when we're trying to create something in our life. Or if we want to feel a certain way, we don't want people who are going to consistently bring us down. So we can have boundaries around who we surround ourselves with. Also, we have boundaries with time. Maybe we have to leave something at a certain time, or we only have a certain time that we can give to a situation. So we have boundaries with time. We have boundaries with our emotions. Maybe we only want to feel something for a certain amount of time versus having it consume our entire day. So we'll allow ourselves to process it. Or boundaries with other people, letting them know that if they really have a lot that they want to share with us and that's really emotional, maybe we're not at the capacity to hold it at the moment. And we need to be able to have a half an hour first, or we need to be able to set some type of boundary so that we can then feel what is required to feel. Or maybe we don't want to feel it and we need to set those types of boundaries. We can have energetic boundaries. Where is our energy actually going? Where are we allowing our energy to leak? And what boundaries do we want to set up around that so that where we're putting our energy is actually most serving to us? We can have boundaries with our emotions where we can say, I can listen to you right now, but right now I'm not able to hold all of that for you. Right now I don't have the capacity. We can have boundaries with our calendar, with what we're actually putting on our calendar, and boundaries with our kids and with our family and our own attention. One of the most important boundaries that we can have is with our minds and with our thoughts. Where are we allowing our thoughts to go? Because a lot of times our energy can leak because we don't have boundaries with our thoughts. Now, it's not as easy as saying we're not going to think about that, but we can start to set some boundaries with our mind because our mind can start to run off and create all of these stories, like we talk about in episode 5, and it can start to elaborate on a lot of things and get caught in a lot of different dynamics and start spinning and spiraling out and going to worst case scenario. And if we do that, then that's not ultimately serving us. And if we don't have any boundaries with that, then those types of thoughts are just going to take over, and it's going to really derail us from what it is we really want to create here and how we really want to spend our time. And it leaks our energy and it leaks our life force. So we also want to set boundaries with ourselves and with what we're allowing ourselves to be available for when it comes to our own thoughts and our own ways of being within our life and our own limits. We can have boundaries around the limits that we set as well. Sometimes when we're really sad or when we're really caught up in an emotional state, or our mind is going a million miles a minute and our thoughts are getting caught up in all these things that ultimately aren't serving us, we could even set a boundary like I'm going to give myself the next half an hour to feel this way, and I'm going to go fully into the feelings and into the thoughts, and then I'm going to shift. And then I'm going to go do the things I need to do. And we can start to set those boundaries with ourselves. It's important to set this distinction too. I think sometimes where it gets muddled with boundaries is that we think boundaries are demands, and boundaries are telling the other person how they need to behave and what they need to do, that they need to change so that we can feel okay. And that's not what a boundary is. In a boundary, we're simply saying that this is what's true for me, and this is what I'm going to do to stay in integrity with myself. So we're just really checking in with ourselves, again, prioritizing ourselves and coming back to ourselves and seeing what's actually true for us in that situation and sharing that with someone else or sharing that with ourselves. We're taking our power back. We're not saying you have to change for me and giving them all the power in this situation. We're allowing us to really stand in our power and share what we're available for. And with that, a boundary really keeps us from abandoning ourselves. Otherwise, it can be so easy to abandon ourselves because as women, a lot of us are taught to abandon ourselves, to focus on what the other person needs, to not disappoint someone else, to not hurt someone's feelings, to not ruffle too many feathers or cause a ruckus or be too disagreeable. We're taught to really be there for other people and to really give other people what they need, even at the expense of our own needs. So that's why boundaries can feel so scary too, because they feel like this direct threat and this direct opposition to what our nervous system has known for so much of our lives and what our nervous system has really internalized as safe. We don't realize that, oh no, this is actually just us not abandoning ourselves. But that's really what a boundary is it's how in each moment and each interaction, it's just making sure that we're not abandoning ourselves. We're really checking in with what we need. But like I was talking about with our nervous system, is that this could be so hard because our whole lives we're taught other things. We're taught to really show up for others, a lot of times over ourselves, and not create these boundaries. And when we don't know how someone else is going to react, it can be really scary to actually muster up the courage to share a boundary because we can feel like it could be a really big threat to the relationship. And so, if you do have a hard time with boundaries, like I was saying earlier, know that it's totally normal. It's because you were taught that through this connection and through really showing up for other people, through not disappointing other people, through not hurting other people's feelings, through saying yes and giving people what they need, potentially overriding your own needs, through not saying no, that's how you get love. That's how you get connection. And this is anchored in not only in our survival patterns and in what we were conditioned to as we were growing up in our nervous systems. This is evolutionary throughout time because we always wanted to be part of the tribe. We needed connection in order to survive. So it literally feels like this existential threat to our system that we might die if we lose that connection. So saying no or disappointing someone or hurting someone potentially can be so, so scary to our systems that it can be so hard to actually say no or to actually set the boundary. I took a somatic training a few years ago and we worked on this. We actually did a whole section on saying no and on developing boundaries and watching how our body language played off of each other. And for some people, they physically couldn't even get themselves to say no. They just froze because the act of actually saying no, the act of actually setting that boundary is so scary to their system. So there's some deep work that can be really worked on around setting boundaries and with the nervous system. And if you're wanting to dig deeper into this, definitely sign up for my email list because I do free live weekly webinars where we go into the deep nervous system patterns and how they affect our everyday lives and how we can start to tweak them. So it'd be really supportive for you. And that's how deep that this runs because our whole body can tense up. Our throat can literally close and stop us from actually sharing what it is we want to share. That's why sometimes you could start writing the text of a boundary, or you could get in your head, or you can know exactly what you want to say, but then you're in the interaction with the person and it's like, wait, I can't do it. I can't say it because it's so scary that the system can just freeze. So this is so built in. And what we don't realize oftentimes is that boundaries can actually be some of the best things that we can do for a relationship because that's how we actually let people know what we need and how they can meet us. If we don't actually tell them, then they won't know. So sometimes it might feel like someone's overriding our boundaries or that they're taking advantage of us or they're not showing up for us in the way that we're desiring to, or they're kind of pushing our buttons. But if we never told them, then they just don't know. So that's kind of on us to share. And boundaries can be such a beautiful way of building trust and building safety within a relationship. Because if we're actually able to share our boundaries, then people know how to meet us. And people also, they really want to meet our needs. Most people want to know what we need and what we're available for so they can meet us there because that feels good for them too. Think about in your own relationships when someone sets a boundary. Maybe it's hard to hear at first, depending on what the boundary is, but ultimately then you know how to meet them so it feels safer. So you actually know what they like, what they don't like, and you can trust it. Or if you never share your boundaries, someone might not actually know what you like, and that can feel a little unsafe. Maybe if you're in a relationship and you know someone hasn't shared a boundary, yet you can feel it. So maybe someone's asking you to do a lot and you just keep saying, yes, I can, but then you're building resentment, or you're starting to make passive aggressive comments, or they can just feel the energy shifting. Or maybe you're the one in the relationship where you're asking someone else to do things for you and they're making some passive aggressive comments, or you're feeling the resentment, or you're wanting to hang out with someone a lot and you could start to feel there's pulling away. And all of those things feel icky in a relationship and they don't feel like truth. They can bring up a lot and they can make the relationship feel distant and uncomfortable. Versus if you just share the boundary and what actually is true, then there's that clear barrier. There's the clear containment. So everyone knows how to show up in the situation. And that actually stops the resentment and those other patterns from arising because now we actually know how to meet each other and we know how to treat each other. We are telling people how to treat us in every moment. I talked about this a bit in the last episode, but we are really letting people know how we can be treated, what we believe we deserve, and how we will allow them to treat us. And so when we set these boundaries, we're actually communicating with someone what's okay and what isn't. This creates so much safety because then they know. Otherwise, they might start pushing buttons and not know that it wasn't okay. Or they might keep talking to you in a certain way and you're not telling them, so they don't know to stop. Think about how would you feel if you were in a situation where someone started acting passive aggressive to you or someone started distancing themselves from you and you didn't know why. Versus if someone just told you from their heart and really regulated and grounded this clear boundary that they had and asked you if you could meet it. And then you were able to, and then you guys were actually able to have a really deep relationship from that. So you can see how boundaries actually really serve us in the highest good, in deepening the connection, not pulling away from it. I was in a situation a few years ago, actually in that somatic training I was in, where there was someone in there who had a really hard time setting boundaries. It was really hard for them. And I caught myself unconsciously, we were in this dynamic where she would say things and I would take her up on them and maybe ask for a little bit more, but she never told me no. And I could tell that she started feeling uncomfortable and started getting weird with some of her answers and maybe even a resentful. But she wasn't saying it to me. She wasn't actually telling me that it was too far, or she wasn't telling me that she felt uncomfortable, or she wasn't setting the boundary. And it made me feel uncomfortable. And I started to notice myself unconsciously kind of pushing a little bit more in the situation because my nervous system was craving that containment, was wanting her to just set the boundary. And I ended up removing myself from that dynamic because I didn't want to play it out anymore. And I could consciously see what was happening. But her actually setting the boundary and telling me that she didn't feel good about what was happening actually would have made me feel way safer than feeling this energetic push pull and making my own nervous system question what was going on. So boundaries can actually provide that safety and it can provide the containment that we're looking for. Because again, if we're not telling people where our edges are, where is too much, then they don't know. And people crave that. People want to know what's too much. People want to know where the pushback is, and people want to know how they can really meet you. And same for you, I'm sure. When you're in situations with other people, it's helpful to know that because it builds trust because you know that they're being honest. Versus if you never know what they actually think, you're always questioning. Or you're thinking everything is fine, but then maybe it's not really fine. And then one day they just blow up. Then you're like, wait, where did that happen? Anger is actually such an amazing emotion to show us where we're overriding a boundary. If we start to feel angry, that means that a boundary has been crossed. And so when we start to feel that, it's important that we look at that and we say, ooh, what boundary was it here? And we start to really approach it with curiosity and see what that brought up for us so that we could start to understand our own boundaries. And then we can work through it, process it, regulate ourselves, and then communicate from a clear, grounded position what our boundary is. I want to give you a really powerful reframe here because boundaries are actually for the highest good. And when we can start to see boundaries in this way, it can really shift how we're viewing them and the angst that we might have around them. When we're in a situation and we can't actually show up for someone the way that they're asking, it's not in anyone's highest good for us to keep showing up for them if we can't actually meet them in what they need, and for them to keep sharing with us whatever they need because we can't give it to them. So actually setting a boundary there is in the highest good. If someone has a lot that they really want to offload onto us right now and they really want us to hold their emotional load, and while we really want to be there for them, so sometimes we think, oh, we need to be there for them because they need us. But if we can't actually give them what they need and we can't really hold that space, then is it really the best thing for them? So when we can look at boundaries from the highest good and we can communicate in that way, we could say, okay, I need to set a boundary here. And what actually is beneficial about this boundary for the other person? Oh, it's actually really beneficial because if they keep offloading on me and they keep sharing all this with me, I'm not going to be able to support them in the way that they need. So saying that, I know that you have so much that you want to share with me and I really want to be here for you. But right now I don't have the capacity to hold it. So would you be open to waiting about 30 minutes so I could get the capacity, or going and talking to someone else because I know that this other person could really support you now? And sharing something like that, you're sharing what you need, and then you're also really sharing how it actually benefits the other person. And it becomes a win-win. And then it also doesn't become, oh, I'm just doing this because I feel like I have to, or I'm people pleasing. It's that rootedness in self. You're prioritizing yourself, this could be so hard if we haven't really developed this muscle. And I know this from experience too, but you're really prioritizing yourself so that you can really best serve the other person and really give you both what's best in that instance. Think about a situation in your life where you have struggled setting boundaries, where it's been hard for you. And if you start to think about it from this highest good perspective, does that shift it? Can you start to see how maybe it would have been better to actually say what you needed in that moment versus what ended up happening after, or how you felt after, the resentment that potentially built after? Sometimes we're the ones allowing these boundaries to be crossed. If the other person doesn't know, then they're not even necessarily responsible for crossing that boundary. That's on us that we're allowing it to consistently happen. And that resentment can build and build and build, and we can take it out on ourselves. We can take it out on the other person. If we start feeling that resentment, that's a really good sign too that we needed to set a boundary and that we're overriding our own boundaries and our own needs. And think too, which boundaries are the hardest for you to set? Is it the boundaries with other people? Is it your own thought boundaries? Is it your energetic boundaries or your time boundaries or your emotional boundaries? And which ones are you the best at setting? Which ones come easy for you? And which ones do you really want to work on? And what boundaries do you have to set that you haven't been? I want to share this story because I think it's going to illustrate a lot of these concepts. Boundaries has been a big lesson for me to learn in the last 8 months. I was told that it was going to be a big lesson in a certain area of my life, and it really has been. I was in a dynamic a few months ago where this person over Messenger and over the phone actually was saying certain things to me, and I really didn't appreciate them, and I didn't think that they were called for or necessary or very nice at all, and not kind. And what I ended up doing, what I felt was maybe the best move in that situation, was I just kind of allowed it and I didn't acknowledge it. And then I just responded with what the best step moving forward was. I kind of ignored what they were saying, and I just thought that I was handling it in the best way at the time because I didn't bite. I didn't really get caught up in the dynamic, but I just, said what the best thing would be moving forward. But what I didn't realize was in that moment is I was actually communicating to that person that I was available for them to speak to me in that way and that I was okay with it. And like I said, we're always showing people what we're actually available for and how they can treat us. So I was letting him know that that was okay for him to treat me in that way. And I was kind of avoiding having the conversation. I was avoiding what he was saying. And a lot of times we do this. We think, oh, I'm just going to avoid this person. I'm just not going to respond. Or I'm just going to ghost this person. That's not actually setting a mature boundary though. We can think, oh, that's not okay that they did that. I'm just going to ghost and avoid. That's not actually letting the person know that what they did wasn't okay. They might not know that that's why you're ghosting them, but we tend to do this. We just don't respond to people at times, or we ignore them, or we avoid the situation in some way. But that is a sign that we need to set the boundary. It's really showing you that your nervous system doesn't feel safe to set that boundary. Yes, avoidance can feel a lot easier. That's not actually what's going to build the safety in your system to set boundaries. So as you start setting boundaries, you're going to start to see, whoa, I can actually feel safe doing this. This is okay. But we can look at what are we really avoiding and how can we start to work through that? How can we start to get ourselves to a place and really see, oh, okay, I'm avoiding this, which means I actually really should be setting a boundary here. And how can we start to work with our nervous systems to get ourselves to be able to set that boundary? So I didn't set the boundary there. And then I actually realized through journaling and through really working on my different tools and analyzing the situation and what happened, I actually became really grateful for the situation because I learned so much about boundaries through that situation. And I really learned in that moment that, oh, it's not just about me not engaging or telling this person that they can't muddle in this area of my life. It's actually way more than that. I actually need to clearly communicate what I'm available for versus just avoid it and not acknowledge it. So I learned that there. And then a few months later, it happened again. And they started saying things that I was not okay with, that felt very out of nowhere, were not relevant to the situation at all. And they were making up this whole story that had nothing to do with the facts and what was actually shared. Just like I talked about in episode 5 about the stories that we tell ourselves. And I specifically told them, I stayed very calm, very regular. I was so proud of myself and my growth because I realized in that situation a few months ago that no, that actually wasn't a boundary. That I actually needed to set a boundary in this situation. I was seeing boundaries as more as don't interfere with this area of my life or don't interfere here. But I wasn't actually thinking about saying anything of, no, I'm not available for this. Like, you cannot talk to me in this way. And I realized, no, I had to actually do that. So it came up again. And this time I set the boundary and I said, I'm not available for you to speak to me this way, amongst other things. And they actually came back and they said, I hear you. And it shifted the entire tone of the conversation. And they realized, because I actually showed them, no, I'm not available for that. So they continued talking to me that way when they thought I was available for it. And even though I didn't like it, they didn't know I wasn't available for it. So once I set that boundary, it instantly was respected. And that really created space within the dynamic. And I was able to have enough self-respect and trust within myself that I was able to tell them no, and that they could not speak to me in that way. And because I had that self-respect and I held that for myself, they then were able to mirror it back to me. But before I did that, they just kept coming at me and talking to me in ways that were just not productive at all. I'm not saying it's going to be respected in every case, but it was so powerful for me to see, oh, wow, okay, this was respected. And look at that. I just had to stand my ground in the situation and say it in an appropriate way. And look at that. It was met. And that's the power of it. Now I feel like I was able to set that and it's getting respected. And now that person knows how to talk to me. And if it happens again, I will set another boundary. You can see how this is so powerful because we're all unconsciously actually seeking for people to let us know what's acceptable and what isn't. And if we don't know, it's hard for us to know how to act. This is what's powerful about boundaries, is that when we can start to set them, when we can develop enough self-love to prioritize ourselves, when we can have the self-trust and respect to set the boundary and not be worried about what's going to happen in the relationship, oftentimes that other person can meet us and can really meet us there because now they know. Whereas if they don't know, they might just keep poking and not even realizing that they're doing it. So we get to set what we're available for, and that's the power of boundaries. And we can look at it when we talk about boundaries being the highest good. If we look at this specific situation, again, it was in the highest good that I set this boundary, because if this person kept talking to me in that way, it wasn't beneficial for them because they were just spiraling out on this story and they're probably going to say things that they regret. And for me, it wasn't beneficial to receive those comments that they were making and to allow someone to speak to me in this way. And it wasn't solving anything in the situation either. So the highest good was actually setting this boundary so that we could move forward. So boundaries really are for the highest good. And they develop so much trust and safety in a relationship because we know that we can now be honest and we can be met. A lot of times we have fear if we actually share our own needs and we actually share the boundary. Can someone meet us there? Or is it going to ruin the entire relationship? Or is it going to create a rift in the relationship? And we don't know. Sometimes it might. It is very possible. Sometimes when we set a boundary, someone might be taken aback, especially if we've never really done that before and it's different. But ultimately, people usually come around and people can really meet us there. And if they don't, well, then we know. Then we know that they cannot meet us in the boundaries that we have and treat us in the way that we're hoping for and that we're available for. So then we get to decide, is this relationship really serving us or is it not? And do I need to shift my focus elsewhere? So we can learn this through boundaries. And while it could be scary, we also have to think, well, do we want to be in a relationship with someone that cannot meet us, that cannot give us what we need as well when we share these boundaries? So they're very revealing. They will tell us a lot about our relationship. And as I said earlier, they will really help us deepen our relationship because we will really get to actually know that we're in this honest, truthful relationship where we're really sharing our own needs and they're being met. And where we know how we can meet each other. So this can create so much depth in a relationship, which can be really scary to get to. But when we actually know that we can have that, it can create so much depth for us with the other person and so much trust and so much safety, because instead of guessing what the other person thinks, how many times have you expected someone to just know what you're thinking or know that you're annoyed at them? Or maybe you've had someone expect this of you or know that you shouldn't have done that because of X, Y, and Z. And then they just blow up at you or then they get annoyed at you and you're like, wait, what? I didn't know this. Or maybe you've been the person who gets annoyed. If we don't actually communicate with people and tell them what we're available for, tell them how we feel, then they don't know. They can't read our minds as much as we think they should or want them to. So the boundary actually allows for this clear communication, allows for them to really meet us. Boundaries can be so hard to set as well. because we were so conditioned to people please and to really be there for the other person, to override our own needs, to not rock the boat. And when we set a boundary, it can feel like we're going against that. And it can literally be like this whole resistance, push pull in our bodies that we have to work through. But I want to reframe people pleasing here, because when we are people pleasing, we might not even realize it, but when we're overriding our own needs for someone else or our own desires, we are actually not serving either of us in the best way. People pleasing, I remember when I heard this, I was kind of like, whoa. So if this pops some of your bubbles, then just bear with me here. But people pleasing is actually a form of manipulation, because we're not being honest, because it's not truth. Maybe we are doing everything that they want, and so they appreciate that, but we're not actually doing it from an honest place, from an integrous place. We're doing it so that we can get the love that we're desiring, so that we don't disappoint them, so that we don't hurt them, to get a connection, so that we feel safe in some way. So I can feel like it's such a great thing to do in the moment, or it's the easiest option. It's actually not the truth. And because it's not the truth, it becomes a form of manipulation. This might sting a little bit, but know that this is so ingrained in your nervous system that it just feels safe to do this. It feels safer to do this because we don't want that rejection. We don't want to disappoint someone. But people pleasing is really just a way that, again, we're trying to manipulate a situation to get what we want. Because if we actually don't want to do what the person is asking and we're doing it, it's actually not the truth. We can go into people pleasing. That could be a whole nother episode. But it is important for this episode because a lot of times we don't set boundaries because of that. And when you are setting a boundary, something I think that gets a bit muddled when it comes to boundaries is there's different ways that we actually share the boundary. If we come at the boundary from directly in the trigger and we yell at the person and tell them don't come near me, or some intense boundary that we're setting, that might not be received as well. And that might really, cause some issues with the other person or hurt the other person. But if we really ground ourselves, we work through the trigger, we take space from it, and then we come at the boundary from a regulated place, from our heart, from the highest good of both parties, then the boundary can really be of service and we can really communicate it in a way that's supportive for all. So notice how you, one, believe boundaries have to be set, and how maybe you've set boundaries in the past and what that's led to, or maybe that's why you feel this way about boundaries. But notice if you look at boundaries in this way or think about setting them in this way, if that shifts your perspective at all. Because when we can set boundaries from this grounded place, it's completely different from this heartfelt place. You can say the same thing, but if it's from a different energy, it's going to be received very differently. So if you're saying the boundary from this triggered place or from trying to get power or control, that's going to be perceived one way, and maybe not in the best way, or maybe not the best way to set the boundary. But if you really get in touch with your heart, with you ground, you get over the trigger, you look at the highest good, and you set the boundary from there, it's a completely different energy. So it's most likely going to be received in a completely different way. And it's also really important to note that you cannot control how the other person responds, but you can only control how you deliver it. And that you're really having your own back and supporting your needs. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you got you. So boundaries really are, at their core, an act of love and an act of safety in a relationship, to really let the other person know what you need and what you're available for, so that you both know how to interact with each other. And boundaries with yourself, with your thoughts, with your energy, are also so powerful and a form of self-love and safety as well, because this way instead of your energy leaking all over the place, you are containing it so that you can focus on what really matters to you and what you really care about and the way you want to feel and what you want to create in this life. And boundaries are what really allow this to happen. So they support your relationships because they allow you to have an honest relationship with clear communication, where you can trust the other person, where you can trust that what the person needs is being shared. And that can feel so good to the system. So to kind of wrap this all in a bow, boundaries aren't something that's going to create walls or distance. That's not what they're meant for, or to hurt the other person. boundaries really are such a deep form of self-love, of putting yourself first, of deepening a relationship, really allowing the relationship to open up to having honest communication, to operating from truth, to finding that safety because you know what each other needs and is available for, and you don't have to guess. And really emotionally mature because you're declaring the boundary instead of moving into patterns of resentment or of ignoring or ghosting or avoiding. You're having that clear communication and you're having those dialogues that can really deepen a relationship and create safety in one. And they're so supportive with ourselves as well, because instead of our energy leaking all over the place and pulling us in a million different directions, we are containing ourselves by having these boundaries so that we can really focus on what we care about most and how we want to feel and what we want to create in this life. So boundaries are such an act of service. And when we approach them and we can look at them through this lens of the highest good, we know that they're benefiting all, that they're really supporting us and everyone involved in supporting each other and getting what we need. Boundaries can feel so tricky on the nervous system because of all of these patterns that we've developed, because of these survival states. But when we can start to see that boundaries are actually increasing connection and increasing the depth that we can have and love instead of taking away from it, we can start to open ourselves up to declare what we really need and what we're available for in each relationship. And this is what teaches people how to act towards us. This is what shows people what we're available for. And this is really when we get to claim what we deserve and what we're all right with in our lives and what we're not. So I hope from this episode that you really got to see a different view on boundaries if it's something that you've struggled with. And if it's something that you are comfortable with, I hope you still got exposed to really a new way and a new lens to look at boundaries. Because when we can start to set boundaries, when we can start to really express what we need, we're able to free up so much energy and not only really have our backs and have deeper relationships, but really gear us towards the agency that we ultimately all have in our lives and to really excel towards our fullest potential, which is really what I want for you with all of these episodes. So notice where things got a little bit crunchy in this episode, where you maybe felt a little bit, I don't know about that, or that feels really against what I've been taught in my life, and lean into that. And notice where you started to see a reframe with, ooh, maybe that is really supportive with boundaries. This makes me feel more comfortable, and let me try them on. And know that if we come to boundaries with an open heart, they're really seeing out how it's for the highest good of all, and that it's a way to serve the relationship and serve ourselves, that boundaries can create so much connection. So with that, I encourage you to see if you can set at least 2 boundaries this week, whether with yourself or with someone else, and DM me. Let me know how it goes. If you want to dive deeper into this concept, if you really want support setting boundaries and support working with your nervous system, because like I said, I see you and I have so much compassion for you if setting boundaries is hard, because I mean, I know it's hard for me. It's something like I've gone over that we're so conditioned, that's so wired in our systems as a scary experience to have. Sign up for my email list so that we can really work through this together, and you can come to the live webinars and I can really work with you and with your nervous system and really support you in being able to integrate this into your life further. So without further ado, let's get nourished. If this episode resonated with you, I would absolutely love if you could like, share, and subscribe to this podcast and leave a 5-star review as well. It is my mission to support as many women as possible in truly coming back to themselves, rooting into who they truly are, and ultimately become nourished in all areas of their lives. I would absolutely love for you to join me on that mission and help spread this podcast to anyone who you feel that it would be supportive for. Also, it would mean the world to me if you could reach out to me on Instagram. My handle is in the show notes, and let me know how this resonated with you, what you are loving in the podcast, and what you would like to see more of as well, so we can deepen the relationship over there. If you'd like to take these principles deeper and really embody them on a next level in your own life, I invite you to join my email list. The link is in the show notes. I will be emailing you each week. I host live webinars digging even deeper into these concepts and how you can practically apply them into your own life so that you can fully become lit up by life, nourished in all areas, and really embody all of the principles that I share here on this podcast. So again, the link is in the show notes to join. I would absolutely love to have you on there. I provide a ton ton of value on my list, different practices you can do each week, the webinars that you can tune into, and a lot of other fun goodies as well. And you'll be the first to know about podcast episodes too. So again, hop on over to my email list so that I can fully support you even further, and let's get nourished.